speak last time, and I really want to thank you for stepping in. It was great of you to do that. You had all of 30 minutes to prepare for that, and we all are grateful. I was especially. You never know when things like that are going to happen. First time I'd ever had to cancel, but I knew that you didn't want me to come down here and throw up on you, so I chose to do that at home. The Civil War was raging, and it was becoming increasingly more bloody and brutal. Our 16th president was falling into a deep depression as every week the war became more complicated. His days were discouraging, and his nights were what seemed to him to be interminably restless, only to awake the next morning to another horrible report of more deaths, more heartbreak, and the future ending of it all seemed forever removed from him. Would it ever end? The burden of all of that rested on the shoulders of Mr. Lincoln, and we who love to read him and of him stand back in amazement at his ability to handle it as well as he did. One afternoon, he felt he just must get a little solitude and hopefully find a place of refreshment and relief. He said to his aide, "I'd like to go to the church, National Presbyterian Church." And the two of them went alone, walked there. That was in the days when presidents could walk freely in the capital city. And night had fallen. They slipped into a side door to an unlit room so as not to call attention to his presence and disturb the meeting. The pastor had just stood to begin to preach. Lincoln crossed his legs, placed his stovepipe top hat on his lap, and never moved as he listened intently to what the pastor had to say. As the sermon ended, people got up to leave, and he remained seated, and his aide leaned over and whispered to him, "Well, what did you think? Did you think it was a good message?" He said, I thought the message was well prepared, well delivered, sincere. The points were logical. The man was clear. Then you thought it was a good sermon? "No, I thought he failed," said the president. "Failed? How? Why?" "He failed because he did not ask of us something great." I've thought about that story, and I've thought about that fact on many occasions. I thought about it this morning on my way in to the seminary. I don't want to fail today in that one area, and I don't think I will, because I have his word that asks of all of us something great. You're sitting here this morning. Most of you are students at the school. You're engaged in your studies. You are in some phase of those studies. Some of you nearer graduation than others. Some of you have just begun. I think I probably speak for most of you when I say, unfortunately, that you really don't ever see yourself engaged in something great. We've been taught very well to do the little things well, and we should. To be faithful behind the scenes, and there's everything right about that. To cover the bases, to become the wind beneath another's wings, to stand along them and, if necessary, in their shadow, and do the work that God's called us to do with the training He's given us. And as a result, the last place most of you see yourself is in a great place, a place of sizable significance, where your life touches many people. It may be in a church, it may be in another culture, through another language. It may even be someday serving as a professor at a seminary or a Bible school or some other educational institution. But whatever it is, as you've told yourself over and over, I want to be faithful in the little things. I want to do what God would have me do. And I applaud that. And I commend you for that. But I warn you, you may have forgotten, though I don't plan to speak on it, that the prayer of Jabez was a prayer filled with faith. Do something great through me, God. And as he asked that, he asked it with humility, not to make a name for himself or a place where they'd remember him, but he just prayed that he would be able to live above and beyond what had been his life in the past, what seems to have been somewhat broken. But the person I have in mind is going to surprise you, because he never, ever at this time in his life thought he would ever be in a place of greatness where God would do something great through him. He's an 80-year-old Bedouin under the burning sun of the Median desert in the shadow of Sinai. And there Moses stands alongside his sheep. Really not even his own sheep, but his father-in-law's sheep. For 40 years he has worked for his father-in-law Jethro. For 40 years he has led the sheep in the wilderness. He's 80. I almost know how he felt. I almost know. This year in October, I will know a little more how he felt. But he saw himself as finished. I mean, he left Egypt as a fugitive with a criminal record. He was a murderer. Took things in his own hands, attempted to rescue the people from their bondage, and murdered an Egyptian, remember, and hid him in the sand, and they were out for him, and he fled and wound up far as away as he could get, where he ultimately met and married his wife and settled in for a life to be forgotten. I don't know where you are in your own brokenness, but we all know something of those feelings. You've made a mess of some things. Your past is maybe checkered. Perhaps you're not the brightest bulb in the room, and you're surrounded by others who are very, very capable academically. I know that feeling. I was accepted at seminary on probation, and that was with reluctance. And I remember while here and serving, one of my first tasks here, I became the lawn man, and I I mowed the grass and planted the flowers, and that's how I got to know the president. By the way, I didn't know this was his favorite hymn, but Dr. Walford loved flowers. And I thought, shoot, I'm planting a lot of those suckers around here. And I did. Amazingly, they lived. So he finally, I think, one hot summer afternoon said, you're a student here. And I said, yes, sir, I am. What's your name? And I told him. And he said, well, I'm John Walford, as if I didn't know. You know, the world knows you. But I was a nobody who came from nothing, raised in El Campo, Texas. You'll spend a while trying to find it. It's tucked away down there in South Texas. And here I was, a student. Never in my life ever did I think there would be much that would come as a result of my studies here. Whatever God planned was fine with me. Whatever it was grace. Moses is in a predicament, and he knows it. The best thing to do, he thought, was to hide out. Let me pass along to you 3 mistakes that I think broken people make. And after I give those to you, I'll do a quick, breezy journey through this battle he has at the burning bush, and then I'll tie it with a couple of thoughts. People who are broken often run before they are sent. It's a tendency on the part of the intense type person to jump ahead, to get engaged, to be involved. All the way through my years at seminary, I was surrounded by students who would say to me, you need to be on the campus. You need to be out evangelizing. You need to be pastoring a church. I thought, who are they talking to? I'm here to learn. I'm here to get some training. I don't know how to do all of that. Some of them were, and they were engaged in that. It wasn't time for me to run before I was sent. I had no calling to do that. I was here, and I gave it the very best I could during those 4 years. The second mistake that's made is that we retreat after we have failed. We run before we're sent. And then often in the running and the doing of it in the flesh, frequently we fail. And we're embarrassed, we're humiliated. Maybe some of you know exactly what I'm talking about. You have failed, and as a result, your tendency is to retreat. You leave me alone, I'll leave you alone, and in the shadows, I'll try to make it as best I can. And the third, we resist when we are called. I fear that most for most of you. In God's plan, which has been in motion since eternity past, He's had you in mind. He has a future for you and a hope, a plan that will unfold. And right now, you don't have a clue. Some of you think you do, but you really don't know ultimately how or where He will use you. I plead with you to stay open, because I can assure you it will include some surprises. Moses was in for the surprise of his life when he came upon a bush that wouldn't stop burning. Burning bushes in that Median desert were not that unusual, or in any desert for that matter. But a bush that wouldn't be consumed by the flame, that was unheard of, which caused him to look at the fire and say, this is amazing. Exodus 3, verse 3. Why isn't the bush burning up? I must go see it. Now, you understand, he's never read Exodus 3. So he does not know that God is in the bush. He doesn't know that's where the voice of God will be heard. And I'm sure one of his first thoughts was when he heard his name, Moses, Moses. First thought was, he found me. I'm not sure they were on speaking terms. We know nothing of his spiritual walk for 40 years. I mean, we have this image of Moses that is just phenomenal. I mean, born in this privileged family, wasn't privileged. Swam the Nile when he was a baby. He didn't swim the Nile. Grew up, looked like Charlton Heston. He didn't. That's not Moses. It's not Moses. Stephen does tell us he's mighty in words and deeds. I think he had a chest full of military medals. He was supremely significant to Pharaoh, who probably had his eye on him as a replacement until he blew it. And now Moses, 80 years old, nothing but memories, and they're fading. And he hears Moses, Moshe, Moshe. In the Hebrew, it's a simple little response, Hineni. You don't even have to put your lips together to say it. Behold, it's me, Hineni. I'm Moses, who are you? Don't come any closer. The Lord warned, take off your sandals. You're standing on holy ground. I'm the God of your father, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I can hardly read it. I can't imagine the thrill that must have coursed through him. He hasn't forgotten me. He still knows me. When Moses heard this, he covered his face because he was afraid to look at God. When you read your Bible, may I urge you not to rush through moments like this. When there is an emotional moment, give it some emotion. Let it be relived in your minds. Put yourself in his place. Now, sandals off. Now on the hot sand. Now in front of the bush that keeps burning and keeps talking. Feel it. He covered his face because he was afraid to look at God. And the Lord asks of him something great. Does he ever? I'll cut to the chase. Verse 10. Now, go. I'm sending you to Pharaoh. You must lead my people Israel out of Egypt. Remember, we resist when we're called, when we're broken. Pharaoh. My picture's still in the post office. I'm a wanted man down there. The last place I want to go. They hate me there. See, all these years, he's had time to relive it. And over the passing of time, your imagination runs wild where you have failed. And you smeared that like a slab of peanut butter across toast. You smeared that across your life. That's you. You're the personification of failure. You blew it. First words out of the bush for the call was go. All right, we'll pause there and let that one sink in. Whenever the Lord uses you in any measure for whatever purpose, you go from here to there, unless his call is that you remain right here for further study. And you're going, oh man, that's the last thing. Well, hang on. You may be the PhD student of the future. And you'll be the most surprised. Because some of you are thinking, PhD? Just let me get out with whatever. I am not coming back. Don't say not doing that. Half of these guys would say the same thing. Who knows but what his plan is for you to be in front of a class and to shape the lives of those who will be going where you will never go. What a calling. But that's their calling. That may not be yours, but it'll be going somewhere. Going where? Away from the familiar, which is what makes something great so difficult. Forgive the frequent personal illustrations. I just don't know anybody else better than I know myself. I will tell you, every calling I've had has been surprising. Every one I said no to begin with. Every single one, sometimes several times. I was graduating the seminary. I had offers to go to different places. And of all people, Dr. Pentecost asked me to be his assistant. First response was, me? And then it was, no. What? He said, think about it. I'd like you to think about that. So I did that for a while. And in the middle of that, the Lord had another plan for us. It was to go to New England. Who in his right mind is going to leave Texas to go to New England? I know if you're from New England, you're offended by that. Get over it. So I go, and I'm the most surprised guy in New England. I told him, no, that's not for me. That's not where I ought to be. New England's not only a geography, it's a way of life, which I never really got. So I wasn't there very long. I would call it pretty much a failure. But it wasn't a mistake. I just had to learn what it meant to fail. And I did. I don't think all of them there that were in that church would say I failed, but it wasn't the kind of place that, exciting, from one day to the next. It snows there. It's starting to snow here a lot. What's the matter with that? Anyway, to my surprise, the Lord tapped me on the shoulder and said, I want you back in Texas. And I said, no, I'm not going back there. I've been there all my life, and you need to go back there. No. So my wife heard, okay, Lord, I got it. I'm on the phone, and she's so anxious to leave. She said, I'll tell you what, honey, you pray about this while I pack. Okay? Yeah. So we wound up in Irving. Came to Irving, little church. And of all things, I follow Stan Toussaint. How bright is that? And while I'm there, it's amazing how God blessed it. Just had the time of my life. And we had a number of seminary students with some of the faculty members that were coming to the church. It was just great. Built a new building and exciting. And the day my mother died, I got a letter from California. February 1971. And they wanted me to think about coming to a church out in California. No. First of all, I'm grieving and got to prepare the funeral message for my mother. It's the most ill-timed letter that was ever written. They wrote again, please think about it. No, I'm where I ought to be. We're just been here just 4 years, and I really want to get at it. Well, then they wrote again. What's wrong with these people? And Cynthia said, we really don't have any business leaving. I know, honey, I know. I'm not asking for it. They won't quit writing. And so I tell you what I'll do. I'll go out there and I'll go to the seminar I wanted to go to here. Then on Sunday, I'll go preach out there and I'll come back here and done. And I went and, it was fantastic. Hate to tell you how much fun we had. And so I came back and she met me. Okay. She met me at the at the airport, like this. I don't want to hear. Anyway, long story short, of all places, this Texan goes to California. Never been there in my life except when I did an internship with Ray Stedman up in Palo Alto. I'm telling you all of this so you'll know something of the surprise things that happened. Not one of them did I pursue, did I seek. Not one of them was I looking for. And it's like, I can't believe it. I didn't know the geography. I didn't know the lifestyle. We had 4 kids. One wasn't even a year old. The other one was 9. They were all little. Every Texan told us that you're going to lose your family if you move to California, which that's a crock. I don't know why people say things like that. You don't lose your family unless you lose your family. It's not the environment. It's the home. And it's challenging, but what else is life but a challenge? You think it's all that great shakes here in Texas for the kids? I mean, it's a challenge everywhere. So we go out there, and I'm telling you, hang on, city. It is really an experience. I never had a multiple staff before, and now I started with no staff, and I hired every one of them. Little by little along the way, it was a time when Orange County was exploding, and our church grew. We wound up couldn't handle all the services, 5 on Sunday, 5 services every Sunday. People sat on the floor, in the aisle, under the piano. The only one we tried to keep out was the fire marshal. I didn't want him to know what we were doing in there. Broke all the rules. We brought in extra chairs. We had television, closed-circuit television. We'll have to build. And I didn't want to go through. I'd gone through a building program at Irving. I don't want to go through one again. And that's what happens. They pull you, and we built a building, and it filled up. Having the time of my life, almost 25 years. So I'm telling you, where the Lord sends you, it is remarkable what can happen to you. And you finally are at peace with it, you say yes to it, and you do it. And having done it, you realize how magnificent the plan is. He wanted to do great things. And I want to do familiar things. He wanted to break molds, and I wanted to be poured into the mold where I am comfortable, where I know all the streets and where the restaurants are and where the grocery stores are and all. I go out there and I mean, those places, those things out there change about every 3rd month, and you're on the move. It's a fast lane, and before long, would you believe it? God opens up doors for a publishing ministry. I never dreamed of writing a book, ever, in my years at this school. I sat in awe of those profs that taught me and were using their texts, and I'm thinking, what would that be like? Can't imagine. Now I've got a publishing thing going. And out of the blue, I have a man named Al Sanders who says, I think you ought to think about being on the radio. And I said, I don't need to be on the radio. That's ridiculous. I never listen to radio. I certainly don't listen to Christian radio. And he says, I know. We need to give him something to listen to. I thought, well, no, I'm still not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I didn't have anybody to lead it. I didn't know how to do it. I don't know that medium. I know preaching. I know a little bit about the church, and that's my rut. That's my thing. And God broke a mold, opened up a ministry for the media. I never dreamed of that. People ask at times, is this all a big fulfillment? No, as a matter of fact, it's all a big surprise. I live my life surprised. I'm amazed when people listen when I talk. Well, most do. Not everybody. And I'm just shocked at the audience God gives us. We're going to Israel tomorrow. Oh, I got to pack. I forgot that. Anyway, I'll have it. 820 people, 18 buses, all aboard. Get on. Let's go. I had never been to Israel until I came to Dallas Seminary, and then I suddenly realized what I've been missing. Now I have a chance to lead a tour every other year. What a privilege that is. Listen to me. They got their Bibles, and they're looking at the places, and they're thinking about how great this is, and We're on the Sea of Galilee, my favorite spot. You know why I like it? They can't build a church on it. I like it. You know, they can't make it religious. It's just water and the shore and the beauty of it and the significance. And you get people there that have never been in their life and they fall back in love with Jesus. How good is that? Me, El Campo Yo-Yo, leading this marvelous opportunity. And I'm all settled in. Everything's great. We're going along, year after year. And I get a call from Dallas Seminary. Sounds a lot like Don Campbell's voice. And I thought, well, maybe I'm in trouble again. And he said, Jack Turpin is the chair of the board at the time. And he said, we'd like you to think about being president. Is this a joke or what? I don't think they've ever been asked that in their life. Is this a joke? And they said, no, we'd like you to really seriously. I said, no. What's the matter with you people? The first time I was there, I was on probation. You ought to see what it'd be like if I became president. And they would not give up. And then Jack had the audacity to say, would you pray? Yeah, I'll pray. My wife is saying, I think it's a good idea. I'm thinking, whose side are you on? That's not how this works. You think it's all spiritual and incredibly life-changing and all that. And whoa, angels drift around on. It isn't it. So whose side are you on? Well, I'm trying to listen to God. Well, you're out of luck. I'm not the one who did. And she's right. It drives me crazy. So I wind up here, and I realize when I'm here, they didn't need another scholar. Certainly didn't get one with me. What they needed was a shepherd. Somebody to tell these people, I love you. You're valuable. And somebody who understands a student who can hardly keep up, stumbles over the languages and tries your best to keep on a level plane. I understand that. You want to quit. I understand. Your wife gets sick. I understand that. Or your husband. We lost a baby here. About finished us off. I understand that. So I come as a shepherd, and I have a chance to be with some people of whom the world is not worthy. And I realize that's what God had in mind. And one of my favorite stories is when I finally had finished my calling here, and we were in a church out in the little town of Frisco. I used to hunt dove in Frisco. It's a dump, back when I was here before. And now it's like, whoa. It's just growing like topsy. We got a church right in the nerve center of all of that. And I'm thinking, God has a great sense of humor. Here I am in the middle of this growing church. I've never started a church in my life. No. But it was yes. So learn from me. Stop saying no. Stop looking at the obstacles. Stop thinking, not me. So Moses protested to God and said, verse 11, who am I? You're nothing. Could have been the answer. Who am I that I appear before Pharaoh? Who am I to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt? You happen to be a human set of vocal cords, and that's all I need. How firm a foundation, you saints of the Lord, is laid for your faith in his excellent word. What more can he say than to you he has said? To you who through Jesus have fled. Fear not, I am with you. Be not dismayed. I am your God. I will still give you aid. I'll strengthen you, help you, cause you to stand upheld by my righteous, omnipotent hand. You're a set of vocal cords, but I am God. Now get out of the Median desert. Resign the job of Pharaoh, of Jethro's assistant, and take on Pharaoh. Well, what should I tell them? Isn't that like we all want to know those things ahead of time? They're going to ask me, what is the name of the one who called me here? What will I tell them? Tell them I am called you. He'll get that. And you know he did. He isn't through. What if they won't believe me or won't listen to me? What if they say the Lord never appeared to you? We got that when we left Irving. Well-meaning lady stuck her head in the window of our car. We're on our way to California. And she said, she was really angry because we were leaving. And she said to Cynthia, you know, the Lord gets blamed for a lot of things he has nothing to do with. So I won't tell you my first Marine Corps response in the car. I just said to Cynthia, roll the window up. So she backed away and rolled the window up, and we drove off. And I said, honey, if you think about that, the rest of the trip to California is going to ruin the beginning. She just can't see past the nose on her face. She doesn't realize. We're not going because we're just craving to get out of here. We're going because we can't stay. Get that. And you can't expect them always to get it. Folks won't understand. Very few will go, you're in trouble. They all go, good. Get out. This is great. They will want you to stay if you've done what you should have been doing. But God doesn't wait for you to finish everything he starts. What if, what if, what if? And finally, Lord, I'm not very good with words. I never have been, and that's where his memory failed him, because he was mighty in words and deeds when he was 40. But when you follow sheep for 40 years, it's down to bleh, bleh. Your vocabulary tends to. I'm not very good with words, and then he said, Lord, please send anyone else. Man, I've prayed that. I've said that. Lord, just send anybody else. I don't want to do that. I'm not calling you because you want to do it. I'm calling you because I want you to do it. Would you please say yes? I'm asking of you something great. You know what most folks don't read? They don't read the end of chapter 4. Think about how Moses felt when this happened. Listen, Moses and Aaron returned to Egypt, called all the elders of Israel together. Aaron told them everything the Lord had told Moses. Moses performed the miraculous signs as they watched. Now listen, then the people of Israel were convinced the Lord had sent Moses and Aaron. Look at that. The people were convinced. And when they heard that the Lord was concerned about them and had seen their misery, they bowed down and worshiped. And flat on his back worshiping, or maybe on his face, Moses realized why the bush never burned up. You see it all so much later. I'm asking of you something great. This message is not going to be a failure. I'm asking you to think yes. I'm asking you to be available. I'm asking you to learn from my frequent no. There's a wrong response when the Lord is on the other end of that phone call. Or when he brings before you something that you hadn't planned on. You're not in charge of your life. We're not our own. We're bought with a price. We're vessels to be filled and used. So get out of the way. Say yes. One by one, God took them from me, all the things I valued most, till I was empty-handed. Every glittering toy was lost. And I walked earth's highways, grieving in my rags and poverty, until I heard his voice inviting, lift those empty hands to me. So I lifted my hands toward heaven, and he filled them with the store of his own transcendent riches, till they could contain no more. And at last I comprehended with my stupid mind and dull that God couldn't pour his riches into hands already full. Get just enough training to be effective, then get out of the way. Empty the hands. Open the mind. Think yes. He's going to use some of you in greater ways than you nor I together could ever imagine. It's coming. Dear Lord God, thank you for continuing to work in my life in such a way that I realize more and more how absolutely insignificant I am in this whole process. I got a voice, and I've got a body, and I've got a mind, I've got a mouth, and I've got a family, and you're wanting to use different parts of that at different times. And keep me from making a mess of what you're planning to do. And I pray the same for those men and women who've listened so well today. Guard us all, our Father, from building those great big barriers based on a human viewpoint that thinks and says repeatedly, no, 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 not me, no. And then let's learn from Moses, Lord, that the only way to go is with a yes. And then help us get out of the way. So I pray that you would fall upon us in a fresh way and communicate this again and again through late night study, early morning classes, in the middle of the day, and in the summer months ahead. We invite you to ask of us something great. In Jesus' name. Everybody said. Coming today, I know this is a busy and not an easy week for you as you finish up your work before the holidays. And so today I want to talk to you about something very practical. It has nothing to do with Christmas. You're going to hear a whole lot about Christmas in the days ahead, as already you have. But I thought today I would just sort of talk with all of us about a subject I never once heard addressed while I was at Dallas Seminary. Someday I'm going to write a book on things they never told me while I was going through school, because they are often the things that seem to occupy so much of our time and attention when we're engaged in ministry. And the subject I have in mind today has to do with what is written about in the 15th chapter of Acts, the last several verses of that chapter, between two missionary journeys and between two seasoned missionary statesmen, we would call them, Paul and Barnabas. As soon as I say that, everyone on the platform and most of you here in the chapel know that I'm referring to the disagreement that occurred between these two fine men. Now, I'll be honest with you, to give you something of an idea of my idealism. When I graduated from Dallas Seminary, it was almost beyond my imagination to think that two godly individuals could strongly disagree. And I really did believe that if the Spirit of God is at work in both lives, and the Lord is the one who wants us to have a relationship that is harmonious and kind toward one another, the whole idea of a sharp disagreement seemed impossible to me. However, I have been engaged in the work long enough to know that you cannot work closely together over a lengthy period of time and have an honest relationship with each other without occasionally having times when you disagree. Hopefully, you can do it without becoming disagreeable, though I'm not confident that this disagreement was solved in a way that these two men were pleased with. It did lead to good things in the days ahead, and that, of course, is the way it is, based on Romans 8:28. But at the time, it was anything but agreeable, harmonious, or even kind. There was a harsh, sharp disagreement between these two godly men. Let me read the passage for us and then just make some comments and then apply it. I'm looking at Acts 15:36. And after some days, Paul said to Barnabas, "Let us return and visit the brethren in every city in which we proclaimed the word of the Lord, and see how they are." And Barnabas was desirous of taking John, called Mark, along with them also. But Paul kept insisting that they should not take him along, who had deserted them in Pamphylia and had not gone with them to the work. And there arose such a sharp disagreement that they separated from one another. And Barnabas took Mark with him and sailed away to Cyprus. But Paul chose Silas and departed, being committed by the brethren to the grace of the Lord. And he was traveling through Syria and Cilicia, strengthening the churches. Let me preface my comments on the text itself by making several comments regarding situations like this. First is that disagreements are inevitable. If you're going to have a relationship with one another that is based on truth, reality, vulnerability, the kind of honesty where you are free to express yourself with each other, there will be disagreements. Opinions and viewpoints will differ, even among the godly, even as both are filled with the Spirit. Disagreements are inevitable. And second, obviously, with that in mind, even the godly will disagree. Each time I come to Dallas Seminary Chapel, I find myself feeling especially privileged to be on the platform with the men and women that I respect so much, and with so many of you whom I know. And there are times that I have to sort of pinch myself to believe that I could be numbered among you and to be respected by and loved by you. And I mean that with all my heart. I certainly have those feelings for each one of you. And today, I'm especially warmed to think that we could have this congeniality, is there such a word? This sense of togetherness. And so it's hard for me to imagine these people disagreeing with each other. but I know that they do. I know that they do. And there are moments where I would disagree with one of them or with one of you, and our respect would not be trashed. We wouldn't from then on see one another as an enemy, but we have an honest, open discussion about something, and we just disagree on it. We just can't come to terms with it. Now, the third thing I want to say is that in every disagreement, there are two ingredients, at least two. Number one, there is an issue that involves principles. And secondly, there are viewpoints, and the viewpoints involve personalities. Issues related to principles, and that's where we form our convictions. Hopefully, we leave this school with some very firm and stubborn convictions that nothing will change. We also, however, will maintain a viewpoint about something because of the way we're put together. My dad used to refer to people's put together. His put together is different than your put together. So because we have that true among us, there will be disagreements. We see things differently. Dr. Bob Cook, the late Dr. Bob Cook, put it so well. God reserves the right to use people who disagree with me. It's a great comment. I have seen God greatly use people I could not work with. And I respect them, and I love them, and I appreciate their giftedness. I just couldn't work with them. We can't have agreement to the level that we need in order to work in harmony with each other. That's the reason on every church staff there are people who are relieved from the staff. Hopefully it's done well, honorably, and graciously, but you can't work together. I've had the experience more times than I want to remember where I've walked into someone's office and closed the door behind me, and we've had a talk that has been under control, quiet, thankfully, and I've had some say thank you. In fact, I had one man say, "You should have done this a year ago," because I don't fit the ministry as it's going in this direction. I thank you for doing what I wasn't, honest to myself enough to do. I wish they were all like that, because there are others who left in a storm. And some do not feel kindly toward me because I made that hard decision. So the godly will disagree, and there will be differing viewpoints, and there will be differing issues at stake. Number 4, in many disagreements, each side has very valid points. And in the heat of the disagreement, it's hard for us to honor and acknowledge the value of the other point of view, because we are so fixed in our opinion and our viewpoint. Okay. Maybe good for you to stop for a moment and think of the last disagreement you had with someone. I did that just an hour ago as I was putting the final touches on this talk. I thought of a disagreement. I kind of had a choice. I have had several. One was with my wife, and you know how those are. And it's none of your business what it was about, but it was a disagreement. We love each other dearly, been with each other 54 years as husband and wife, and absolutely would die for one another. Our love is deep and profound, and it is, I believe, it is unconditional. But we disagree. And I remembered one of those disagreements. I had a choice of several. Then I have a friend with whom I disagreed recently on something, and we didn't part ways. We just agreed to disagree. And thankfully, we weren't disagreeable in that. So you think about your situation, and as you hear these words I share, maybe you're going to blend that or weave that into the situation you've just come out of. So this is hopefully will help you. What we've got here is two strong men both of whom any one of us would love to have worked, and both of whom, each of whom we deeply admire. Now, the history of it goes back to chapter 13, if you'll turn back there. On the first journey, Paul and Barnabas travel together, having left Antioch. They make the journey, and verse 5 of chapter 13 tells us, when they reached Salamis, they're on Cyprus, when they reached Salamis, they began to proclaim the word of God in the synagogues of the Jews. And Luke adds, they also had John as their helper. Now, Luke is not yet in the group, so he refers to they, not we. He's not in the group until chapter 16. So probably gets his information from Paul. And they have John as their helper. John is a young Jewish convert, reared in Jerusalem, a godly mother who even had the church in her home and a great prayer meeting that ties in with Peter's life at the time. John has seen God at work. God has been reared. John has been reared well. This is the John Mark that wrote the gospel. This is young John Mark. So think of yourself as a young, perhaps older teenager or in your early 20s, and they've got John Mark with them who is traveling as their helper. He's not a spokesman. He's helping them. He's helping carry the stuff. He's helping with the work that's involved in a journey this rugged. Now they get verse 13. Paul and his companions put out to sea from Paphos, and they came to Perga in Pamphylia. You check the terrain and the geography. It starts getting really tough, as is true in every missionary trip. There are moments that don't look like the pictures that you had looked at earlier before you took the journey. Now we come to a mountain range. Now we come to a rugged shoreline. Quite likely the insects are swarming. And maybe at this time, Paul falls sick, and there's some discouragement among even the two older men. And John, we read, John left them and returned to Jerusalem. End of the explanation. We so wish we had further information. Did he talk about it? Did he leave in the middle of the night? Did they discuss his struggle? One man is so practical, he even says, as an aside, the boy got homesick. I don't know how you knew that, but it's a possibility. I'm sure that was part of it. When you're young and you're that far away from home, I had a man write me who found himself at the tip of Africa. And it happened to be Ravi Zacharias. And Ravi said, as he stood there and watched the oceans collide, he said, I don't think I've ever felt so far from home as at that moment. He was away from his wife, and all of us have had that experience, not there necessarily, but you are in a place and it's not as you expected. And in the midst of the unexpected, something happens. And when you're young, in a hurried moment, you quit. Unless you're unusual and have great fortitude, you walk away. You leave. Now, when you get to chapter 15, 15, we've got the seasoned missionaries following the Jerusalem council. Paul is led of God to revisit the brethren in the places where they had been, verse 36 tells us. And he wants to see how they are. Great idea. Everything good about the plan. Missionary journey number 2 is about to begin. Luke records Barnabas was desirous of taking John, called Mark, along with him also. He's the one who had defected. That's a harsh word, but that's the way Paul would see it. You don't see it here, but you do see it in Colossians 4:10 that Mark and Barnabas are cousins. Keep that in mind. Barnabas has probably had time to visit. He's the older of the two, and he's visited with John Mark. And he has had time to see the changes in his growth. He's watched him mature some over the months. He's encouraged with the words of John, as he has said, I so regret walking out on you. I look back on it, and if I had it to do over, of course I wouldn't, and said all the right things. And so Barnabas says, and it's an imperfect tense here, the way Luke writes it, verse 37. He's staying with his position. He's saying we need to take John Mark. We need to give him a second chance. Let's do that. And Paul kept insisting they should not take him. Let the text unfold as it reads and linger over it with a little imagination. What you have here is the issue. Remember I said earlier, there are two things. Here is the issue. Should a man who defected be given a second chance? Maybe add to it, this early in his life. Should he be given more time to mature? Whatever the reason was, John had left them at a time they needed him the most. The toughest days of that first journey were ahead of them, and he was gone. They didn't have him as a helper. Paul remembers it. Barnabas is now desirous, and so he stands his ground, saying to Paul, no, you're too harsh. The young man needs a second chance. So there are different viewpoints. Paul keeps on insisting. The argument, I take it, is lengthy. Barnabas is looking at the man. Paul is looking at the principle more than the man. And it makes no difference why he left Barnabas. The fact is, he left us. And he left us when we really needed him. And I've seen his type before, he may have added. Guys like that don't change that quickly. Maybe even tossed in a verse of scripture. That often helps. Confidence in an unfaithful man in a time of trouble is like a broken tooth and a foot out of joint, as Solomon wrote, he may have said. I'm sure Barnabas could come back with his verse to justify the grace in his heart. Now, what interests me is verse 39. Spent more time on that verse than any of the others. There arose such a sharp disagreement. Okay, let's pause there. Paroxysmos is the term. It's the word from which we get our word paroxysm. Listen to several brighter minds than mine identify the word. The quarrel was heated, writes one man. It was a major disagreement, writes another. F.F. Bruce, a provocation, a sharp disagreement. C.K. Barrett writes, there was a sharp dissension. The disagreement was sharp. Exactly how sharp, it is not easy to say. The Septuagint carries the sense of to provoke, to irritate, to enrage. Same term. The conflict has strong emotional qualities to it. The conflict does. Same root word is used to describe Paul's reaction to the idols that he saw in Athens. His spirit was so provoked by what he saw in the multiplicity of idols, as he writes of it, or as he refers to it in Luke's writing in Acts 18. Darrell Bach, in a rather thorough work on this word, writes this. There arises a major contention between Paul and Barnabas. The term paroxysmos, when used negatively, describes anger, irritation, or exasperation in a disagreement. This is a major disagreement, writes Bach. Here is an example where a disagreement was so great, the ability to work side by side was affected. I would love to tell you and comfort you with a statement right now that you will never know such sharp disagreements. That was all in those days, but they're over today. Tragic. Hard as it is to hear it, it isn't true. You will. You will have sharp disagreements. If these two men had it, you will have them as well. And there will be all kind of jockeying for positions. One man put together a creative argument that may have gone like this. Paul, John Mark, we can't take him. He failed us last time, Barnabas, but that was the last time. Paul, he's likely to fail us again. He's a deserter. He said, time to think it over. We've got to give him another chance. He's got the makings of a great missionary. Tell me, Barnabas, isn't it because he's your cousin you want to take him again? Thrust, twist. That's not fair, Barnabas responds. You know, I've tried to help many people who aren't related to me. I'm convinced this lad needs understanding and encouragement. He could be a great evangelist someday. We need someone who can stand up to persecution, an angry mob, beatings, perhaps jail. Our team has been close-knit, thoroughly reliable. How can we trust a lad who failed like John Mark has failed? No, Barnabas. Recall the words of the Master. No man who puts his hand to the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom of God. I told you he'd have a verse. It works. I've talked to him about his failure. I'm sure he won't defect again. To refuse him might do spiritual damage. At the moment of his repentance, it'd be like breaking a bruised reed, like quenching smoking flax. It's too soon to trust him, says Paul. Paul, remember, soon after your conversion, I took a chance with you. The apostles were afraid of you, thinking you were faking your conversion in order to infiltrate the church. I didn't make you prove yourself first. I'd rather not keep John Mark waiting. I vouch for him now. That's how it went, perhaps. Well, they couldn't come to an agreement. Verse 39 concludes, they separated from one another. Barnabas took Mark with him and sailed to Cyprus. Paul chose Silas and departed, being committed by the brethren to the grace of the Lord. Let's address briefly a solution, then I'm going to apply it further. There's no reconciliation because both sides could be supported. You're already taking sides, I would imagine. I find myself doing that as well. A.T. Robertson captures the scene beautifully. No one can rightly blame Barnabas for giving his cousin John Mark a second chance, nor Paul for fearing to risk him again. One's judgment may go with Paul, but one's heart goes with Barnabas. Paul and Barnabas parted in anger and both in sorrow. Paul owed more to Barnabas than any other man. Barnabas was leaving the greatest spirit of the time, perhaps of all times. They separated, severed all contact. You never mention of their working again together. Handed to Paul later in his ministry, he asked for Mark to come. In fact, in his last letter, on his last words, he says to Timothy, come before winter, bring Mark with you. Mentions even that he's profitable to me for ministry. So Paul came around. Thank the Lord for the passing of time and a little bit of wisdom that comes with age. So what do we say? Well, I think there are 4 lessons. Let me see if I can limit it to that. Number 1. When in disagreement, work hard at seeing both viewpoints, not just your own. And a good passage to refer to while you find yourself in a lingering disagreement is Philippians 2, 3 and 4. Look not only at your, we would say today, your own viewpoint, but the viewpoint of another. Do your best in the midst of a disagreement to see the other viewpoint. Second, when both sides have good support, they usually will, seek a wise compromise. A man named Flynn suggests this compromise. Listen to this. Could Paul or Barnabas or both have developed a reasonable compromise? Giving in would not have meant heresy, for no doctrine was involved here. Could Paul have said, we'll tell him he's on probation. If he doesn't work out the first month, we'll send him home again. Or perhaps Barnabas could have conceded, we do need dedicated workers on the team. Let's give Mark a minor assignment to see how he does. In the meantime, we'll start our journey, and if we hear he's measuring up, we'll send for him to join us along the way. Couldn't they have agreed on a contingent plan? I need to warn you that it is easy when you are trained in a very conservative school and you are taught by very strong-hearted, careful students of the Scriptures, using the teaching is the very Word of God. It is easy to leave feeling you have the answers at every point. What you forget is that not everyone you're going to work with has gone through this school, has been taught by these who hold to these convictions and see this exactly as you see it. You need wisdom as you're dealing with those different kinds of personalities. And rather than blaming them because they didn't go to Dallas Seminary or criticizing them because they don't have the convictions you have, realize they're coming from a different point of view. And they could very well support it just as firmly as you can support yours. I noticed that in the passing of years, as I've learned the hard way to work with people, I've had folks say to me, we didn't think you'd ever come around, or that you'd ever be big enough to admit that we had a point. How come it is that so many Dallas Seminary graduates are so stubborn in their convictions? That's a great question. What they're concerned with is the way we go about disagreeing. People who respect us don't expect us necessarily to turn and agree with them at every point, but they do expect courtesy, and they do deserve that. A sense of grace in dealing with those that are from another point of view. So sometimes a wise compromise is the best way to go, and it is not a mark of weakness, certainly not giving in to your principles. You're working on the relationship as well as the principle at stake. Here's the third. If the conflict persists, care enough to work it through rather than stomp out. If the conflict persists, care enough to work it through rather than just stomp out. Determine now that you will never slam the phone down on anybody. You will not slam a phone down on anybody. That is an insult to the person you've been talking to. Determine, and this is especially helpful in a marriage, that you won't give the person the silent treatment. Man, we can do that. We may not verbalize it, but we just don't talk for a day and a half. And we eat in silence, and we go to bed side by side, but back to back. Don't let the sun go down on that kind of wrath. Maybe you had every reason to be angry, and we're commanded to be angry, however, not to sin. And for sure, guard against taking shots behind the back of the person you've had the disagreement with. Christians can be the worst in the area of gossip. I formed the habit in more recent years of, when I start hearing that kind of stuff, saying to the person, may I quote you? May I quote you to other people, and even when I see this person again, may I quote you to that person. And boy, it's amazing. The gift of backpedaling kicks in right away. Well, why wouldn't you say that to that person? First of all, I can't resolve your conflict. I may make it worse because I'll be tempted to take your point of view because you will convince me. Be careful about taking shots behind the other person's back. Fourth, and I do mean it finally, if it cannot be resolved, graciously agree to disagree. And sometime even agree to separate. Agree that we cannot work together. Agree that there cannot be an ongoing relationship between you and your coworker, and you say that that's it. We've worked at this long enough to know that we're not going to resolve it, so we will agree to disagree. If it's any help for you, just as the second missionary journey became very successful, sometimes separation is used of God in a magnificent way to spawn another realm of ministry. How many schools began because of a sharp disagreement with the mother school, the original place where the group was working together? And in the heat of the battle, the people determined we can't keep working together. And another school is formed some distance away. I want you to also guard against the disagreement leading to your starting another church down the street. If you have a disagreement with a pastor or a staff, and God has gifted you, and with that has come a following of people, don't yield to the temptation of listening to the people who follow you, that just a few blocks away there's an empty building and it's available and we can start our own stuff down there. Check out the ethics of that. Check your heart. Would that be right? Would that serve the body of Christ? If you are man or woman enough to disagree and to separate, then get some miles between you and those individuals if you plan to begin another work. Starting it back to back is a dirty pool. I was serving alongside another individual many years ago, and there was in that particular church, there was a growing group of people who were in disagreement with the way the church was going. And for some reason, they thought I would be a much better answer than the one who was serving as the man I was answerable to. And I'll never forget it, one evening, several of these people came over to visit with us, and they said to Cynthia and me, "Okay, we got a surprise for you. And close your eyes." So I closed my eyes, and we heard paper crinkling, and the next thing we knew, a bag was put over our heads. Never been kidnapped before. And so they marched us out. I said, "Don't peek, don't look." So they got in the back of the car, and we drove and drove and drove. I've never told this story before, so bear with me here. We got there, and door open. "Okay, hop out." We got out, walked over. Didn't know where we were. Okay. They walked me over here, said, "Okay, stand right there." All right. Whew. Bag came off. I find myself in an empty, abandoned church, standing behind a little lectern. And they said, "This will start our new church. We got everything. We got a preacher, got a pulpit, got a building." And I broke my heart. In fact, I used it as an opportunity as we sat around a circle that night. I said, "Man, I know you really are concerned, but I want you to know this is not the right thing to do. If there's a disagreement, this is not the way to solve it. let's not do this. Let's don't go there. First of all, I would never do this. And second, you need to really check your heart. Because if you're going to deal with a disagreement, just moving a few miles away and continuing on is not the way to go about it. You owe it to yourselves and you owe it to the man that I serve and honor to work it out with him. And I'm not available to do this. I don't know if you'll ever be in a situation anywhere near that, but learn from that experience. Thank the Lord I handled that one right. I wish all my stories ended that well. I have not been nearly that heroic all through my life. And I've succumbed to gossip. I have succumbed to saying things behind people's backs. I have not resolved every conflict wisely, which makes this passage all the more meaningful. You know when I thought about this message? Last Sunday night, our children's choirs sang, and they sang the Christmas program. It was beautiful. And one of the lines was the lines from the angels, and all the little angels were standing this tall. They were great. Their little halos. One put hers on backwards. Another one, one fell off the platform. That's the cutest thing. They were all up there. Fallen angels. And out of their mouths came peace on earth among those with whom God is pleased. Keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. Do that. It's part of your calling. Okay? We need the Spirit of God to enable us to do that. Father, thank you for a few words of counsel for all of us. They may apply to a home where there is a conflict with a husband or a wife. They certainly do apply in relationships, maybe at work, where some of these men and women are fulfilling their responsibility in their occupation. They can occur in a school where there is a disagreement with fellow classmates. So we pray that you would fall in a fresh way upon us with a reminder that this is Christianity at its best. May we learn to live with each other in a way that is honest and vulnerable and loving, forgiving. In Christ's name.